Hello, church. I'm going to offer a quick report on what's been in conversation between the Classes Missions Committee, Redeemer University College, and Resonate Global Mission. What we're calling, temporarily at least, Mission Toronto, or perhaps Youth Empowered Transformation. Our focus this morning is going to be talking about four alliterated things: the passion, the promise, the picture, and the process of Mission Toronto. What's the passion behind it? Well, it's all about the gospel. Ephesians chapter 2 begins talking about, as for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins, and we were saved by grace through faith, and we're going to enter these works that God's prepared in advance for us to do. And then we get to Ephesians chapter 2, which talks about what Christ is doing. It says Christ's purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, that's Jews and Gentiles, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility. What's the passion here? Well, first of all, is it's talking about Christ's purpose, and this gets our attention. Christ's purpose was to do something. That should be the purpose of the church, and certainly the purpose of Classes. The second exciting thing is that Christ's purpose is about oneness, unity in the body. And this is something we sorely need today when we're being challenged in all kinds of different ways by forces to divide and to make us fearful and to retreat from Christ's mission. So Christ's purpose is about this oneness, this unity. But how does this oneness come? It comes when two different groups of people, in this particular case, talking about the Jews and the Gentiles that don't know Christ, coming in and joining this one body. So Christ's purpose, this oneness, is created by the church as it engages the mission of Jesus Christ to bring all people into the gospel, to reconcile both of them to God through the cross. This is good stuff. The purpose of Christ to make one church through the mission of Christ. Now, what about the promise? What's the hopes that we hope to see out of Mission Toronto? And they are threefold. First of all, as Classes, to grow a shared sense of missional responsibility for every neighborhood within Classes. We don't really know the city of Toronto, let alone outside of the city of Toronto, that well, much beyond our own churches. And so we want to grow that sense of understanding and engagement in the mission of Christ throughout the whole region. Now we're talking about the city of Toronto, but of course, this is really can be also about the whole region of Classes. We want to grow that sense of shared missional responsibility. Secondly, we want to engage fresh new leaders. It's a real challenge right now in the denomination that we have a shrinking availability of leaders just for established churches. And we want to grow new leaders who are fresh young leaders to be engaged in Christ's mission. And thirdly, to bring renewal into the established church and to plant new local churches. A lot of what we're talking about here comes out of the conversation we've been having over the last year or so, connected to the challenges of smaller churches. So this is really about renewal. So what's the picture around Mission Toronto? And this is going to start out with a picture that can help us understand what we're talking about. To think about the church as that which the gospel ripples out from in these three different circles, as I described them. At the center is the hearing of the gospel. This red circle indicates the impact of gospel proclamation and Sunday worship, and that might be for those who come to the building on Sunday or those who are impacted through social media or some other form of broadcast. So hearing the gospel is at the center. Then the community brings the gospel out from this Sunday worship event through this orange circle, embodying the gospel in our neighborhoods and in friendships with people that are neighbors or coworkers. So the gospel kind of moves out from Sunday gathering to where we are in community in our neighborhoods. And finally, living the gospel, shows the scale of the gospel mission out from the relationships in which we show the love and power of God in all kinds of different ways. Now, let's imagine picturing this in different examples of churches so we can see it maybe a little bit more clearly. Church number one might have an average Sunday impact by its gathering, a smallish community, but for some reason this church is just really reaching its community with the love of Jesus Christ. So there's a real scale of large mission. And from this example, when we live in community with those who are engaged in the mission, we can also grow our community and grow those who don't know Christ to come to know Christ. Church number two might have an average Sunday service attendance, but has a fairly large community. People, they're kind of spread out in all different neighborhoods, but for some reason don't really have a missional engagement in the way that Christ perhaps calls them to be. And then church number three, smaller church, smaller community, smaller missional impact. One would imagine this is a church that is really struggling. Now, another way of picturing it is looking at the map that is of the region of Toronto that comes from our denominational website. And we see the red dots, these places of gospel proclamation where our churches are. Now, beyond just thinking about the renewal of the local church, if we think about the mission, we could think about it kind of the other way around. Renewal option number two, starting from growing missional partnerships around places where there are no churches, to gather communities around them, and to grow leaders and new churches out of that. So there are opportunities in the city of Toronto to grow missional partnerships in areas where there are no churches, to gather a community of people that are interested and engaged in that mission, and then grow disciples out of that community who potentially could lead new churches in the city of Toronto. So there's sort of two renewal options: renewal of a local church, but also doing missional engagement in areas where there are no churches. Back to the map. To the top right, you'll see a yellow circle around what is Grace Scarborough. What if we began investing in Grace Scarborough and help them to start with, as an example, to grow their missional impact around their church? Then as time goes by, perhaps then maybe we'll move over to Etobicoke and help them to grow their missional impact. But what you'll notice is there's another yellow circle. This is renewal option number two. Just to the east of First CRC in Flemington Park. Maybe God's calling us to join what he's already doing in that neighborhood. Time goes forward. Now we're involved in, again, another area where there isn't a church southwest of Vaughan. Time goes forward. Now there's communities of people who are in these areas of missional partnership. And we're gathering people who say, hey, we want to be about this mission. As time goes forward, we find leaders, and now we have fertile ground to plant a church in Flemington Park, as well as helping now Clearview in growing their mission around their church, and time continues to go forward. And we have really started to take missional responsibility. This is imagining stuff well into the future, maybe a decade into the future, just a picture of what Mission Toronto might be about. Finally, how are we going to get there? How are we going to get from this grand vision from where we are today? And so we want to talk about these four things really briefly. The first is a context to imagine. We've been in conversation with Redeemer University. They have an entrepreneurial division, I guess, of their university, and they've asked us to give a context of a church in an urban setting. And so we are sharing with them, with permission from Grace, to share the context, have some stories about being on mission around Grace Scarborough, and they're going to imagine some kind of missional experiment. And they're gathering this little event at the beginning of March in just a couple of weeks. So this is maybe will create some really interesting ideas that will grow into something else. The next step might be to host a summer internship. This is something that's happened with Redeemer in Classis Niagara. And this might be step number two, to provide an opportunity for maybe from somebody at that event. Say, I would love to work with a local church. If you're interested and say, hey, we would love to have an intern for the summer, or even for a longer period of time, like 8 months from January to August, come and talk to me. And there's more details that are included in your handout to explain that a little bit more. Then over time, maybe there's other internships in which we grow a sense of understanding where God is calling us to focus, to renew churches, or to start new missional partnerships. Then the ultimate dream would be imagining this is an ongoing year-round organization that happens in Classes Toronto, somewhat funded by Classes, but other partners as well. Well, that's it for now. If you have more questions, I'd love to hear them. But also, this is just the beginning, and we'll keep reporting on Mission Toronto as time and circumstances permit.